Then once that 90-second intro goes off, we'll go live from there.
Let's go.
Cool. 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. The Brooklyn Nets, their collaboration is probably considered similar to how LeBron James and the Big Three got their team together in Miami, and even in pro wrestling, I like throwing this around the NWO, where you have three or four of the most talented stars in the game together and looking to cause a little bit of mayhem. But for everybody who's watching live, I am Earl Holland, and with me here to talk about the Brooklyn Nets is longtime Nets fan Daniel Granada. I almost did it. I almost had
It's all good.
But
Grenada, Granada, it all works.
Daniel, how did you become a Nets fan, and had you followed them since the Jersey days as well?
No, definitely not. I'm from Brooklyn. I moved down to Miami a while ago. So I moved down here. My father brought me up a Knicks fan. Right? He was a Knicks fan. Brought me up a Knicks fan. Early 2000s, obviously they had their rough times, and then I found out I was a big Jay-Z fan. Found out Jay-Z's thinking of bringing the Nets to Brooklyn. So I always had my ears out for when that would happen. And once 2012 hit and that happened, I was full board Brooklyn Nets. Now, I used to be a Jason Kidd fan, so I did follow the Nets, but I wouldn't claim that I was a New Jersey Nets fan. I did root for Jason Kidd, but no, I wasn't a New Jersey Nets fan.
What is the most memorable moment as a Nets fan?
Uh, it's tough because my most memorable moment since they moved to Brooklyn is Game 7, Round 1 against the Toronto Raptors. Paul Pierce got that block on Kyle Lowry to win the game, win the series. The reason it's hard to say that is because I hated Paul Pierce so much that I hated rooting for him. So it was like a bittersweet. I wish somebody else would have gotten that moment for the Brooklyn Nets, but that's definitely the best moment as a Brooklyn Net so far. We went on to get our ass kicked by the Miami Heat the next round. So
expectations coming into the season, especially the acquisition of James Harden, was maybe a weeks away prior to that, but a healthy KD getting the clearance and then having Kyrie back and the head coach with Steve Nash being the head coach. What were your expectations coming into the season?
I mean, like most people, you're thinking that you have a chance to win the championship. I wasn't sure if it would happen this year, just because when you've seen the history of those big threes, you brought up the Miami Heat, they failed the first year. LeBron with Kyrie and Kevin Love, they failed the first year, right? So it doesn't always work immediately. Even Kobe, Shaq, Karl Malone, and Gary Payton, they failed. So I at no point did I ever think it was a sure thing, but I did think we had a good chance to make it to the championship. Now, once we got James Harden, even though everybody jumped and said, oh, for sure we're going to make it, I was still kind of hesitant because I wasn't sure how James Harden would fit. And I mean, up until this point, we really still don't know because they've only played 7 games together. But I mean, it's not in my eyes. It isn't championship or bust, even though a lot of people think that way.
What's the most unique piece of team-related memorabilia or clothing that you have? Is there a good luck jersey that you have or that you wear all the time?
Well, I have this. People see this and they would assume that it's Kevin Durant, but I used to love Joe Johnson. And I don't know if you can see where it says Joe Jesus, but KG nicknamed him Joe Jesus. He may not always be there, but he's there when you need him. And Joe Johnson was my favorite net back when he was around. But to say that I have anything special, I mean, I customize shoes, so I have a lot of custom Brooklyn Nets shoes. But other than that, no, nothing that stands out.
Was there a point in the season that you knew that that's it, the Nets are making the playoffs? No doubt about that. No second thoughts at all.
I mean, most people would say that was never in doubt at any point. I never had any doubt even before the season began. When James Harden got here, I mean, he took off with the team even though Kevin Durant was injured. I mean, I don't think there was at any point anyone had any doubts that they'd make the playoffs. Now, what the seeding would be, I wasn't sure if they would have home court advantage in the first round, but I've never doubted that they would make the playoffs.
Was there a point where you were concerned that they were going to miss the playoffs? And as you mentioned before, that you didn't have any doubts about them making it, but did you feel like they were going to underperform at all?
Yeah, when I found out Kevin Durant had that hamstring injury, I mean, you know those hammies, they linger. So my worry was Kevin Durant's out, and everybody always said that it was going to be difficult to figure out how they would share the ball. But I don't think anybody's worried about how Kevin Durant's going to share the ball with anyone else. I think the problem is nobody knew how Kyrie Irving and James Harden would share the ball. But I think those 2 months that Kevin Durant was out, that James Harden played with only Kyrie Irving, I think that more or less solidified that this big three can work no matter what combination you get. And if it's all three together, Kevin Durant's going to fit in there smoothly because he doesn't need the ball like Kyrie and James Harden do. And James Harden showed that he's okay with sacrificing. You have Joe Harris and Landry Shamet out on the wings hitting those open threes. Blake Griffin taking charges. I have no doubts that this team has a chance to succeed.
Looking at the playoff matchups, who do you think the Nets match up the best with in the Eastern Conference?
I'm not worried about too many teams. I guess if I had to choose one, I think they match up well against just about everyone except for the Heat and the Sixers. I'm not worried about Milwaukee. In the first round, I'm kind of hoping we get the Knicks, to be quite honest with you. Just because Knicks fans have been so hyped this year that I would kind of like to have that matchup just to get that out of the way. But the only two teams that would really scare me are the Heat because of Bam Adebayo, and the Sixers because of Joel Embiid.
To you, what do you think, if there's anything that a weakness that the Nets have?
Oh, interior defense. We have no big men. The only big man we really have is DeAndre Jordan, and he plays like if he's wearing 6-inch Timberlands. He's very slow, and I know he's trying. I feel almost bad for him because he has become Twitter bashing. Once he's in the game, Nets fans are ready to sweet their hearts out about how bad he is. So I feel bad, but he's a liability, but he's the only one with size. Blake Griffin and Jeff Green hold their own as best they can, but they're undersized. So whenever we play Joel Embiid or we play Giannis, they're going to get theirs because we have no interior defense. So that goes back to the whole we have to outscore those teams.
In your mind, the abrupt retirement of LaMarcus Aldridge after getting him off the waiver wire, how much would he have benefited to that roster, especially as the stretch goes around, and of course people recovering from injuries and just sort of giving people the load management as they head into the playoffs?
The depth would have helped because Blake Griffin, I think, has played more just because he's been forced to play more because LaMarcus Aldridge retired. Offensively, he stretched the floor, right? Because he can hit those threes, so he brings that center out to the arc to defend him. Defensively, he's a big body. he would have helped immensely, and I think it also killed us because I think we were going to make a run at Andre Drummond, but because we got LaMarcus Aldridge, they figured that we'll take the 3-point hitting center than Andre Drummond that could just rebound. So we passed on. I think we passed on.
So far, seeing Steve Nash in his first year as a head coach, what were you thinking that he was going to bring to this team, and really, how would you evaluate his first year coaching at the NBA level?
Well, his first year coaching, I think, has been a success. You know, people nitpick at his timeout selections, things like that. But if you think about the fact that he's had 27 players play on his team this year, he's had 35 different starting lineups. That's more than half of the games that they've played. And they still are second or third in the East right now. I think they're third because of the tiebreaker. That's a very impressive resume for somebody that's on their first year coaching. So I think he's done a phenomenal job. My worry is late game situations. I'm not sure what kind of plays he's going to call or what he's going to do when you have a close game and you have the big three out on the court. Because I'm not sure, who do you give the ball to? I mean, everybody says Kevin Durant, but the little bit I've seen the three all together in close games, Kyrie Irving's gotten the ball more often. So I'm not sure how he's going to handle that when it comes to playoff time. But outside of at the end of the game situations, I think that he's done a phenomenal job.
Did you feel that, especially, you see that thing where a lot of Hall of Fame caliber players don't make the transition to coaching well, and everybody saw Jason Kidd's rough start and coaching, having him asking a player to bump into him to spill ice just to give more time.
That was genius, to be quite honest with you. I love that. But yeah, that was a rough first year. He had Paul Pierce, KG. Everybody had high expectations, and they started off really bad. They picked it up the second half of the year, but they started off really bad. And that's one of the reasons that I don't overreact to the Bucks sweeping the Nets, well, beating them twice last week, because I was reminding everybody on Twitter that year that Jason Kidd had Paul Pierce and KG, we swept the Heat in the regular season. I was so hyped about them sweeping them that I got great seats because I live in Miami to go watch that first game. And I was smacked by reality by the time the third quarter was over. So the better team always wins in the playoffs. So that's why I'm not worried about the Milwaukee Bucks.
Looking at the NBA Finals prediction, who's coming out of the East? Who's coming out of the West? Who wins and in how many games?
I think the Nets are going to come out the East. I really do. I think Steve Kerr is going to come back healthy. He's supposed to come back against San Antonio, I think. So I think they're going to make it out the East. I don't think it's going to be an easy road, but I think they'll make it out. And I do not bet against LeBron. I will never bet against LeBron. I think that the Lakers make it. And even though Nets Twitter might hate it, I think that the Lakers, if Anthony Davis is healthy, they could take it. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the Nets get it. Well, obviously, I want that to happen. But I can't bet against LeBron and a healthy Anthony Davis.
And how many games do you have? And how many games do you think this
final? 7 games. I think that would be an awesome series.
And I think especially with the shortened season and things going crazy, and of course having to play in around, there's a lot of talk about that. And I don't know if it's controversial a lot, but a lot of people sort of either love it or hate it, seeing their team has another chance to make it in the playoffs, but other teams saying like, well, you had it for the top 8 seeds. Why add these other 2 seeds to make everything more confusing?
But don't you think it's made it more interesting?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, honestly.
Before we used to have just the top 8 teams make it, and by this time of year, even the 7th and 8th teams would be resting their guys because, okay, we're in. Whether we're 7th or 8th, it doesn't matter. Now it matters. Now everybody's playing to the end because it matters. You don't want to be in that play. I think it's a great idea. I think LeBron was off base saying that whoever made it should be fired.
Yeah, and what's interesting enough, when his team was at the top of the division and the conference, he didn't have a big deal about it. It's like, oh, watch those other guys fight it out, duke it out for those 2 spots. It's something different when you're in that position. Now it's a completely different story when you're the one who's trying to fight for your playoff lives.
Exactly. Luka Doncic also randomly said something once he realized that they weren't going to get to rest towards the end of the season either. So it's a lot easier to speak when you don't think that you're the one that's in there. But I think it's a great idea. I think it's made the season more interesting for most teams.
Well, Daniel, I really do appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. I know a lot's going on and everybody's getting hyped, especially with playoffs coming up. What are ways people can reach out to you? And if you got anything to promote or share or shout out to, feel free.
More not so much. Like I said, I was telling you earlier, I'm relatively new to Twitter, right? The sixth borough. I just started tweeting this couple months ago. I'm more active on Instagram. I have the sixth borough, which is where I connect with all the Nets, Jets, and Yankees fans, right? Those are my three squads. And if anybody's interested in sneakers, I customize sneakers with my wife. You can follow me at the Sneaker Teacher. And that's more or less. I don't have too much to promote.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I have a bunch of friends who live in New York, and they always talk about it's that weird dividing line where, like, I know my friend is a Mets, Jets, Knicks, and Rangers fan, and I feel like there's like the hierarchy is like one side it's like it's supposed to be Yankees, Knicks, Rangers, and Giants, and then the other
Right.
half is Mets,
Yes.
Mets, Jets.
And a lot of times it goes that way. My father introduced me to the Yankees when I was a young kid. Took me to Yankee Stadium. So that's what brought me to the Yankees. I wasn't a really big football fan until I was about in middle school. And for some reason, Keyshawn Johnson had just gotten drafted. I saw him, being promoted all over the place. And not knowing anything about football, I was like, well, this guy seems pretty cool. And Keyshawn Johnson got me into the Jets. So that kind of threw me off because it's usually Mets, Jets, Yankees, Giants. But, I got screwed up somewhere in the middle.
Are you an Islander? Wait, did you mention
Rangers.
hockey? Rangers.
I follow all five sports, but when it comes to soccer, I'm Miami. I fell in love with soccer when I came to Miami, so I stuck with that.
Well, Daniel, I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. What we'll do is once we'll finish this, we'll talk off air for a little bit just to wrap things up. But for everybody who's been watching, you see me do the whole New York swing. Knicks earlier, Nets right now. Everybody, I really appreciate you guys tuning in.
Wait. Did the Knicks fan say he wants to play the Nets?
He feels like, well, actually, getting the Nets would be good because it felt like the shorter, the small margins of defeat were confidence boosters because they played them close. That made them feel confident. But they said basically they're playing with house money right now.
Well, that is true. They're playing with house money, but I think they should be hoping to play against the Hawks in the first round so they can at least get that first round win because they have a chance to eliminate the Hawks if they play in the first round.
Yeah, I can definitely see it. And what they say, playoffs are always a crapshoot. So as soon as everybody gets in, you never know what weird stuff occurs too.
That's true.
But yeah, I really appreciate it again. Like I said, we'll talk about a little more offline. For everybody who's been watching, thank you so much. We got so many more playoff previews. We're going to have the Jazz and eventually the Clippers and the Lakers and the Blazers and all that later this week. I really appreciate it. For everybody who's been watching, thank you so much. Daniel, I really appreciate it. We'll talk a little bit offline.
Appreciate that. Thanks.